Hi everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to look at how to convert fractions to decimals, and then we're going to compare fractions and decimals using inequality symbols. And then lastly, we're going to simplify expressions that have decimals and fractions. So if you ever want to convert a fraction to a decimal, all you need to do is just divide the numerator by the denominator. And you want to remember that the numerator is the top of the fraction and the denominator is the bottom of the fraction. So in our first example, we want to convert 1/4 as a decimal. So I'm going to divide 1, which is the numerator, by the 4. So I'm going to make a division box, and I'm going to place the numerator inside. So I'm going to take the numerator, put it there, and then I'm going to put a decimal point. Okay, every number has a decimal point at the end of it. We just don't write that decimal point. Okay, it's just kind of understood that it's there. So the first thing we want to do is ask ourselves, okay, how many times can you divide 4 into 1? You really can't. So what we do is we add a 0. And now look at that number as a 10. So pretend that decimal point's not there for a second, okay? How many times can I divide 4 into 10? I can divide 4 into 10 at most 2 times. So I'm going to put the 2 above the 0, and I'm going to have the decimal point line up. So these decimal points need to line up with each other, and then I'm going to place my answer right there. Okay, and now I'm going to multiply 2 times 4, which gives me 8. The next thing you want to do is you're going to subtract 10 minus 8, which is 2. Okay, now I'm going to, since I have a remainder of 2, I'm going to add another 0, and I'm going to keep going until I can't divide anymore. So the next thing I'm going to do is bring that 0 down here. Okay, so I took the 0 and I brought it down here. And now I'm going to repeat. So I'm going to start over and I'm going to divide 20 divided by 4, which is 5. And then the next step was multiply. So now I'm going to multiply 5 times 4, which is 20. Okay, after you multiply, you subtract. 20 minus 20 is 0. Okay, this is known as your remainder. Because there's a remainder of 0, there really is no remainder, I can stop. And my answer is just going to be 0.25 is my final answer. Okay, so 1/4, if you think about it, is 1/4, which is 0.25. Okay, and you're going to do that for each of these. The only difference with B is that there's a negative. Okay, so let's take a look at B. So for B, I have 5/8, and I want to convert that as a decimal. So do you remember the steps? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to divide, and then you're going to multiply, and then subtract, bring down, and repeat. So those are your steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that numerator 5 and put it inside the division box. Okay, remember you're going to add a decimal, just so you don't forget it, put it up top. Okay, so I'm going to divide 8 into 5, which I can't do. So I'm going to add a 0. Okay, I can divide 8 into 50, so it goes 6 times at most. 6 times 8 gives me 48, and then I'm going to subtract. Okay, so I divided, I multiplied, and then I'm subtracting. 50 minus 48 is 2. My next step is I have to bring down. So I have to add a 0 to bring it down. So that 0 is just going to come down here. And now I'm going to divide 8 into 20, or 20 divided by 8. 8 goes into 20 at most 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Now I'm going to subtract 20 minus 16, which is 4. And then I'm going to bring down another 0 because 4 is my remainder. Okay, Okay, I'm going to keep going until I can't divide anymore. So now I can divide 8 into 40 5 times. Goes in perfectly. Now I multiply. 8 times 5 is 40. After I multiply, I subtract. And 40 minus 40 is 0. Since I got a remainder of 0, I can stop. My final answer is 0.625. Okay, for 2/3, I'm going to put the 2 here. We know 3 can't go into 2. Okay, if it was a 3, 3 can go into 3. Yep, that's great, but it can't go into 2. So I'm going to add a decimal point, and then I'm going to add a 0. 3 goes into 20 how many times? 6. So 6 times 3 gives me 18. Okay, after you multiply, you subtract. 20 minus 18 is 2. Okay, I need to add a 0 and bring down a 0. You notice 3 into 20 again, right? So that didn't change, it goes in 6 times. Again, you're going to multiply. 6 times 3 is 18. After you multiply, you subtract. 20 minus 18 is 2. What do you notice is happening? So you're going to keep getting 20 over and over and over. This is known as a repeating decimal. It's just going to keep repeating. So to show that, I'm just going to put a 0.6 and then we put a bar above it to show that that number just keeps repeating. So you're telling someone you're just going to keep getting 6 over and over and over. So at that point, you can just stop because you'd be there all day trying to work it out. Okay, I'm going to go down to, I'm going to skip letter D. You can try D on your own. I'm going to go to E. And for E, I'm getting 2 3/16. So this is known as a mixed number because it's made up of a whole number, 2, and then a fraction. So it's mixed. So we're going to convert that first to just an improper fraction. An improper fraction is when the top, the numerator, is greater than the denominator, the bottom. So to do that, I'm going to multiply 16 times 2. So 16 times 2 gives me 32. And then I'm going to add 3. 32 plus 3 gives me 35. And then you just put it back over the denominator, which is 16. So to get that 35, I'll make a little note here. I did 16 times 2 and then plus 3. So it's 16 times 2 plus 3. And then you put it back over 16. So your answer is going to go over whatever the denominator was. Okay, now I'm going to do the same steps. I've got 35 over 16, which is the same as 2 3/16. And I'm going to put the 35 inside, put a decimal point so I don't forget, and I'm also going to put it up there. And I'm going to divide. Okay, how many times can 16 go into 35? Well, I know 16 times 1 is 16. 16 times 2 gives me 32. Okay, if I go 16 times 3, I'm going to be too high. So I'm going to put the 2 there. 2 times 16 is 32. Okay, so I multiplied. My next step is subtract. 35 minus 2, which is 3. Okay, I need to add a 0 and bring down a 0. And I'm going to repeat. Okay, 16 into 30. 16 times 1 is 16. 16 times 2 is 32. I went too far. So it's going to be 16 times 1. 30 minus 16 gives me 14. I'm going to add a 0 and I'm going to bring down the 0. Okay, now 140 divided by 16. What you can do is you can go to a calculator. Okay, I like Desmos, Desmos. It's a free app. And you could keep trying numbers. Like maybe try 16 times 5. Okay, if we get to 140, as long as we don't go over 140, we're okay. Okay, so we can go a little bit more. Let's try 7. 16 times 7 is 112. Okay, I can go a little bit more. Let's try 9. All right, I went too far because I got 144. So that means it's going to be 8. Okay, I can divide 16 into 140 8 times without going over. So that's going to be an 8. And we know 8 times 16 was 128. I'm going to subtract 140 minus 128. So 10, I can't do 0 minus 8, so I have to borrow and make that a 3. So I'm borrowing a 1. So now that's 10 minus 8, which is 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. So I know that's 12. And I'm going to add a 0 and bring down a 0. Okay. And now I'm going to do this again. 16 times, let's see. So 16 times 8 was 128. So I'm going to try 7. Okay. 7 times 6 is 42. Put down the 2, carry the 4. 7 times 1 is 7 plus 4 is 112. Okay, you're probably wondering why I'm not stopping, and you'll see why here shortly. So 120 minus 112 is 8. Okay, let's go one more time. I'm going to add a 0, bring down a 0. Now, 16 goes into 80 a perfect 5 times. So that means we're going to be able to stop. 5 times 16 is 80. So I get a remainder of 0. So my decimal is 2.1875. And you can check that on a calculator. If I divide 35 divided by 16, you get 2.1875. Okay, now you're not allowed to use calculators, but to check your answers when you're doing your homework, that's fine, or you're doing notes in class. For the check your understanding, you can try these problems on your own. I will give you the answers. So you'll get 0.4 for A, you'll get negative 0.375 for B. For C, you'll get 0.83, and the 3 is the one that's going to repeat. Here, you're rounding your answer to the nearest thousandth, so that means you want to go 3 decimal places to the right. So I'm going to get 2.154. And for E, you're going to get 3.3125. Okay, let's look at comparing fractions and decimals. So anytime I want to compare, I want to use one of my inequality symbols. So remember, this is your greater than symbol, this is your less than symbol, and of course the decimal and the fraction can be equal as well. So what I'm going to need to do, and I'll do one of these, is you're going to have to convert the fraction to a decimal and then compare it. So I need to make 1/8 into a decimal. So to do that, I'm going to do what we were just doing. So I'm going to divide 1 by 8. So I'm going to have 8 into 1. I'm going to add my decimal. We know 8 can't go into 1, so add a 0. 8 goes into 10 one time. And now I multiply 1 times 8. Now I'm going to subtract. And I'm going to add a 0, bring down a 0. 8 into 20 is 2. 2 times 8 gives me 16. We're going to subtract. 20 minus 16 is 4. Add a 0, bring down a 0. And now you know you can divide 8 into 40 an even perfect 5 times. So since 5 times 8 is 40 and there's no remainder, we can stop there. So 1/8 is really 0.125. And we're comparing it to 0.120. So pretend those decimals aren't there for a second. Just pretend it was 125 and 120. Which one is greater? How do they compare? So 125 is greater than 120. So is 0.125. 0.125 is greater than 0.120. Okay, and you're going to do that for each of these. So I will give you the answers so you can try. These are actually going to be equal. This will be less than, equal to, and then you need to put these in order. And it's going to come out to be 0.302 is the smallest. And then it goes to 1/3. And then it will be 3/8. So you want to make all of those decimals, convert them to decimals, and then compare from least to greatest. So this is least to greatest. As I go to the right, those decimals and fractions are getting larger. And then last but not least, simplifying expressions with decimals and fractions. So this is going to take some multiplying and dividing. There's some tricks we can use here. So anytime you divide by a 10, 100, 1,000, you're just going to take that decimal and you're going to move it back to the left. So anytime you divide, you're going to move the decimal to the left. So you're going to move it back. And this is for powers of 10. Anytime you multiply, you're going to move the decimal to the right. Okay, again, it's multiplying powers of 10. So when I say powers of 10, I mean like 1,000, because 10 to the third power is 1,000. Or even the number 10, 10 to the first is 10. So we know order of operations, we're going to divide and then multiply, right? We're going to go right in order because they are occurring next to each other. So just go left to right in the order they occur. So if I take care of this first part here, 723.6 divided by 1,000, I'm going to take my decimal and I'm going to move it back 3 places because 1,000 has 3 zeros. So just count 1, 2, 3. So this is going to turn into 0.7236. And then I still have times 10. Now remember, when you're multiplying by 10, you're going to move the decimal to the right. How many places? Just 1, because you've got 1 0 there. So if I move this to the right, my answer is just 7.236. The rest you're going to have to work out using order of operations. So here in letter B, we would first want to do parentheses, which is 8.6 minus 1.2. So you're going to line the decimal points up, and I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. Bring down the decimal point, so line your decimal points up. 8 minus 1 is 7. So what I'm left with is negative 0.5 times 7.4. Okay, so now I need to multiply 0.5 times 7.4. Okay, and let me move this over so I have some space to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is start on the right side and just multiply 4 times 5, which is 20, right? And I can't put a 20 down, but I can put the 0 and then add the 2 to that column. Now I'm going to multiply 4 times 0, which is 0, plus 2. So that gives me 20. Now I'm going to move over to this number. And when you do that, you're going to move over a space. So you're going to put your numbers here. If you forget, you can always add a 0 as a space filler. So you're never going to put anything in that spot right there when you move to that next column. Okay, you're going to always leave it blank. So you can either leave it blank or put a 0 so you remember. And now I'm going to multiply 7 times 5, which is 35. But again, you can't put 35. You can put the 5, and then we can carry the 3. 7 times 0 is 0, plus 3 is 3. And now I'm adding. So I'm just going to add the column. 0 plus 0 gives me 0. 2 plus 5 gives me 7. And 3 is not being added to anything. So your answer is not 370. Okay, we have one more step. You need to put the decimal in your answer somewhere. So the easiest way to do that is count how many places are to the right of each decimal. Like here I've got one place. So that's 2 places. So I'm going to move 2 places to the left. So my decimal point is here. I'm moving it 2 places to the left, so it's going to go right there. So your final answer is 3.7, and you can add the 0 if you want, or you don't have to. So it's going to be 3.7. Okay, you could try the rest of the problems on your own. For C, you should get 4.09. For D, you should get 28.4405. And for A, you get 89.78. For B, you get negative 12.166. For C, you're going to get 2.59. And for D, you're going to get 995.8. And then there's a couple application problems here. So you're going to use the formula and plug in. So just like those problems above, here you're going to get 8.4. Here you're going to get 7.35. By the way, it's meters squared for A there, and this is feet squared because it's area. And then for B, you should get 1.91. So practice these, make sure you're good with them. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me.